Welcome to Bass Talk with Hagen and Hayes. This is season 4, and what's today's topic, Susan?
Today's topic, David, is teaching our first lessons.
Fantastic.
So
Tell me
tell
about
us.
your first lesson.
Okay. Well, it's really funny. My mom was a piano teacher and she had a studio in our house. And so I would hear her teaching. My dad was also a music teacher as well. And he taught a little bit at our house, but my mom consistently, like 5 days a week, she had like 30 to 45
Yeah.
students at any given time. So I would hear her teaching. And to me, this is really important because I studied piano with her. And
Mm.
sometimes she was a mom of three and a wife. She had a lot going on in her life. Sometimes there'd be a phone call that was urgent. My grandparents would have a little kerfluffle or something, and she'd have to take the call, and she'd say, Susan, why don't listen to Mary playing whatever. And so I didn't realize it, but I was actually between hearing her and sometimes just helping the other students along for a couple minutes, I was acquiring teaching skills.
Mm.
And never really thought much about it. And when I was in college, both my bachelor's and master's degrees were for performance, not for teaching. So again, I really didn't think much of it. But when I got out of college, I thought it would be kind of fun to teach a little bit, and I felt like I should, right? It felt selfish not to. But my very first student, oh, I'll never forget. Her name was Elsbeth, and I don't know where she is. But I'll tell you, I was petrified. I didn't know. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. And so I talked to my parents. I said, how do I deal with this? And my mom said, well, you're great at being encouraging, but
Mm.
catching people's mistakes. I've heard it for years. She said, just teach what you know. So I thought back to the beginning of when I started, and it was like, okay, hold the bow the right way, hold the bass the right way, get a sound. Then jumped right into Samandal New Method Book One, which you and I have spoken about this before. It's a great book. It's a wonderful fingering system. But to be playing in F major and B flat major right at the beginning, first position on the lowest strings, it's a hard way to start. And I did that with her and worked her through that book, and then I would give her supplementary actual music and scales. And so I always sort of formatted my lessons the way my lessons with Ed Barker were: warm ups, technique, which then would lead into scales, and sort of an etude, and then a solo piece, and maybe an orchestral piece. And, they were hour-long lessons, so there was plenty of time to portion it the right way. But I remember just being so nervous the very first lesson and thinking, who am I to boss this kid around and tell her what to do? I was maybe 23 years old and just fumbling. But the more I did it, the more I adjusted what I do. I don't start anyone on that first couple of pages of Samandal ever anymore. You learn things that work better. I love to show them the G and that string, and it's much easier to press down and get them comfortable there. And maybe not in half position where the notes are farther apart. I'll go in maybe third or fourth position where the notes are closer, and then have them shift back and start stretching out their hand a little bit more. And there's thanks to recital music, there's so much more repertoire than what I feel I knew existed, which I only knew a tiny bit of what existed. But it's so much more interesting that I find that I can personalize the music choices to the student's kind of demeanor and their learning style. And I'm never at a loss for what to have them learn. So I just blabbed a whole bunch. I'm so sorry. What about teaching your first lesson?
Mine is when I was still at music college. I was a student at the Royal College of Music in London, and a friend had just got a job in Welsh National Opera, and she had 2 hours teaching at this school in White City. And White City is where the BBC used to be, the famous iconic building for the
Yeah.
BBC. And so I said, yeah, I'll take on this job. I was still a student. I had time.
Hmm.
And I don't remember even having an interview. I think they were so relieved that there
Yeah.
was another bass player to take over. I just got the job. So
Nice.
I turned up, and I'd never been to White City in my life. And the next building, there was a school and then a field. And the next building was a prison, Wormwood Scrubs, where all the, you've heard of it. Is it quite
Yes.
famous?
Yes.
That was the next building along to this school. So I was in White City,
Don't
and
want to
it's
go to the wrong building.
It was quite a multicultural school, and it was interesting. So I had 2 hours. I think I had four students, half an hour each.
Nice.
And the first one was a chap called Jeff George. I've never forgotten him, and he was about a foot taller than me
Mm.
and about a foot wider. And he sort of hulked into this room, and he took up most of the room because they were tiny teaching rooms. And I was so intimidated. Whatever he did, I agreed with. It was the funny.
Oh, I love that.
But it was interesting because nowadays, my students will say, how do you know how to teach? How do you know all this? And so the one thing to remember is you still know more than the student.
Right.
Your skill now is learning how to teach them and how to make it intelligible. Because just because you can do it doesn't mean someone else can, and just because you can do it doesn't mean you can help somebody else do it.
Right.
These are
Right.
all skills you have to acquire,
Yes.
and I think I just learned them. And that one, I think I stayed there for about 3 years, and then another school, which was in a nicer part of London, they offered me a teaching job, 2 hours. And then when I left the Royal College of Music, a job came up in Sidcup in Kent, which was just a train ride away from London. And they realised they had no bass players, so they bought five mini basses,
Ah.
which so they're going to start from the ground up, which is a perfect way of doing it. And they needed a specialist bass teacher.
Mm.
And I went, and you always think you're never going to get the job. And I
Yeah.
bet I was the only person who applied. And so I got this job, and I think I started with about 3 hours teaching. But within a term, I was up to two full evenings. I said I'd gone from 3 hours to about 8 hours.
Mm.
But it was lovely teaching the beginners because it was all new. But again, at the time, there was no repertoire. It was all stuff
Right.
that I'd learned.
Yep.
It's only subsequently that people now have repertoire, which really just wasn't there. But the teaching I loved. I have to say, I didn't realize I was a teacher, but I just got better and better students, and I got better. I think hopefully better at teaching,
Yeah.
and I love every minute of it.
It's great. It's really fun, and I love seeing the improvement. I actually this semester at Berkeley will begin in a couple weeks, and I always say I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. Each student, I'm going to have them take out their phone and make a video of themselves playing in their first lesson,
Mm,
so that then at the end of the semester they can see their progress. Because when you're the student, you hear yourself every day, you're practicing, and it's hard to sense how much better you're getting. As a teacher, I see them once a week. I see it, but I would love to have the bookend of the start and the finish of the semester for them. I won't do it on my phone because I think that's just creepy. I'll let them do it for themselves. But it's really funny, and it was making me think of when I first. I know we've got to wrap up. I'll make it quick, but when I was teaching, I started to teach at a small college, and then I also got a job teaching at the youth orchestra that I started at, and I built the bass program was very small, and when I left, it had like 35 bass players. We went from like
mm,
starting with 10 to about 35. And I did a similar thing at Boston Conservatory. There was six bass players, and when I left, there were like 12.
mm.
And I left there because my teaching at Berkeley was just tremendous, and I was loving it, and I wanted more time there. And there's only so many hours in a day. But my interview at Berkeley, I was literally talking about this at Christmas or New Year's with my family. I had no idea it was an interview. I went in there thinking that I'd been hired to give what we call a master class, but at Berkeley they call it a clinic. And
Right.
it's the same thing as a master class. And then after that, they said, would I do a couple of open lessons, meaning a couple of the faculty or students could sort of filter in and out. And I thought, oh, you know what? If I get to do this once a semester or once a year, this would be fun. And so I went in to do it, and I had already had what apparently was an interview with the department head earlier where he was asking about my teaching style. I thought he was just picking my brain. I was clueless. I didn't understand what was going on. So when I went in to give the master classes, my husband said to me, "Do you think you'd like to bring a resume with you?" And I was like, "Well, I don't see why, but okay." So I tossed one in my tote bag. And when I was leaving after having given the master class and the open lessons, my now boss said to me, "This is great. I'll let you know in a couple of weeks if you've got the job." And I thought, what job? And so I said, oh, well, I happen to have a resume right here, thanking my husband in my head. And I said, would you like to see it? And he said, well, I really know everything that you've done. Everyone's been talking about you, but sure, it wouldn't hurt. And when I got that job, I was so excited. And I think it was a blessing that I didn't know it was an
Mm,
interview. And this is one of the things I think I might have been nervous if I had known that they were interviewing me and looking to see my teaching
mm.
style. But I encourage my students, I say, I'm teaching you. I want you to keep these notes. I want you to think about this so that when you pass your knowledge off to the next generation, you're not afraid during your first lesson. So I would just say to everyone who wants to teach or wants to try it, do it. Teach what you know and then keep learning. And what you know will continue to be interesting and relevant.
Some of my students still contact me now about how to teach. That
Yeah.
might be a certain technique or something. And I always very encouraging. And I always say, you just have to find your own way of doing it. However I taught you or whatever you did, that's my way of doing it. You
Yeah.
have to find your way using your words.
Right.
But you find it. You find a way through,
You
and
do.
that's the nice thing.
Yeah.
It's and being I absolutely love being a teacher. And so when I look back, this was 1982, I think, when I first started, and I've loved every minute of being a teacher. But I only do, I don't know, 20% of my life is teaching.
Right.
It's really nice. It's a nice balance. I wouldn't want to do it full time,
I
but
don't
I
think I
enjoy
could.
what I do.
Yeah.
But when I look back on those very first lessons in White City, and I just it feels like another time. It feels like 200 years ago. It's
Me
so
too.
strange.
Is
Mm,
yeah, it's really interesting. And it's a fun journey, and I love it.
mm, it's
Well,
nice.
I think you chose another great topic, David. I want to thank everybody for listening to season 4 of Bass Talk with Hagen and Hayes. Remember to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.